Hello, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish podcast, Walking with Our Shadow, where we share ancient indigenous teachings of remembrance, all so we can walk and learn how to walk a path of radical self-love. As we take the time once again to come to the circle. And let me tell you, it has been a rough time getting to this circle. There has been a lot of distractions. There have been a lot of agendas pulling and competing for attention. And also, while I'm recording this over a time period which in the Mayan calendar is said to be out of time. It is a month that lasts 5 days. And it is time for deep contemplation as we move into this calendar's new year. And while that has been happening, it has been storming in Hawaii to the point that roads are flooded, to the point that a lot of our animals have to stay inside under cover, and they're not happy about it, so they have a lot to say about it, and tensions are high. We are also grateful for all of this rain that is helping grow the cacao that we just planted, grow the sugar cane that we just planted. And thankfully, there have been some breaks in the storm. And thankfully, we have had access on and off to power and Wi-Fi, on and off. And we could sit here trying to fight the storm and fight the crumbling around us and try to do more. Yet, as the precipitation continues, and it seems that we were going to be in this for a few weeks, there must come a time to just surrender. Surrender to not just the forces of nature, but to this time and this period of life that we are living now. Surrendering doesn't mean that you have to like it. Doesn't mean that you are quote unquote going along, but you are allowing and witnessing the times that we are in. With the approach of a new moon and the phases, as we still sit in the time period of the north of bones and stones and seeds, as we sat over the last weekend with the energy of Shiva on the 18th, everything in the cosmos, everything in the conversation of mythology, which is very, very real, is pointing us in the direction of a choice that we must make. We are posed this choice or this question, each as individuals in our own time, and yet humanity as a species and a whole has been asked this at several times. And it is a question that has been posed to other species as well. And there are counts of how we have faced or welcomed or danced with or fought this question, this opportunity. And this is an opportunity to face the end of what we know, the end of what we have created and created from, to finally reach and reach out as we reach the end of ourselves, to reach out a hand to the other creatures on this planet. And when I speak of creatures, I include plant kingdom. And not just witness each other as we are evolving or devolving with grace or no grace, but to ask for help and not just lend a hand. It seems that we are in the question to ask the question. I remember there was a time period in my life when I woke up and I realized I had not lived longer than that day in my other lifetimes. And I said, wow, well, I've reached the end of knowing what's going on now. I'm reminded of my father who would always say, ask them now when they think they know everything. As I continue being trained and continue walking this way of medicine and receiving the opportunity to be called a wisdom carrier, the reason that we are called wisdom carriers is not that we know everything, as that we realize that we are only facilitators of the question. And that we will continue asking questions, knowing that we do not have the one way, that there is no one way. And so we reach out to continuously lift up the voices of all beings to be heard, witnessed, and acknowledged as sovereign. In this witnessing, in this acknowledgement of sovereignty, as the rain continues to show us its sovereignty, its gift, its way of being, we come to the directions of the circle that orient us to live a circular life, to have good boundaries, good delineations, and boundaries that we are rejuvenating in the way that circle creates its own clearing energy. And so we approach the directions of the north, the east, the south, and the west. The direction above, that as we start walking into a new trecena in the Mayan calendar, is a direction of eagle. This Nahual teaches us to look at a great perspective, and this eagle reminds us that there are different planes of existence. We call upon the grace of this planet that continually gives us an opportunity to live our lesson. And we give thanks to this time and place, and to the galaxy within us all. And with that, we continue with grace and thanksgiving to open this circle officially. Sometimes it takes time to get to the circle. Sometimes we open the circle differently because it calls for. There is no one way to enter the circle or to call upon the circle. And that is where your intuition, or I truly believe intuition comes from relationship as you strengthen it, allows you to walk in a way where that information that you are receiving is not just filtered through the lens of you. But filtered through the lens of observation. And learning how you sometimes get in the way of your observations or are blind to a complete form of an observation. I was recently in a class and it came up that people were sharing notes and they saw that they wrote completely different notes than the other person. It shows us that our way of noting what we think is important or what we want to remember differs. Wow, that rain is really coming on, isn't it? And it is that difference that we can allow ourselves to truly embrace these opportunities of interpreting. We realize again that we need to reach out to be able to get a fuller picture, observation, or interpretation so we can enter into deeper relationship. One of the relationships that we are tasked with having intimacy is with ourselves. And when I speak to my students and they keep asking me questions, well, Marita, what do I do now? I've learned that tool or technique, and what do I have to learn next and next and next? And I say, do you know yourself better? And they say, well, but yes, because I have these things I can do. I said, but are you using them to know yourself better? And not just to know yourself better, but to be aware of how and when you are using these tools, who you are in that moment. If I give you a quote-unquote hammer and you explore all the different ways of using a hammer, that is one way of learning about how a hammer can be used. What have you learned about the operator? You, as the operator, using that hammer. Not just the process that you went through to learn how that hammer can be used, but who you are in each of those moments. How you reacted, how you worked through frustration, how sometimes you have days where you are physically stronger, and so using a hammer might be the tool, and some days that you are not even physically strong enough to hold the hammer. Know thyself is not about creating a romantic idea of who you are or a story that you have to sell to people that you're a good person. But from a very everyday perspective, very practical perspective, is to know what you're operating with. It's easy to get into the programs and get lost in the programs and who wrote this program and where does my belief structure come from. But many times we don't even look at the actual hardware. Because we can't want to keep downloading new software, downloading new information. Yet maybe the hardware can't handle it. We don't give ourselves time to integrate, and we don't really know what we're working with. And many times we approach our quote-unquote hardware as something to overcome. Our body as a vessel as something to be mad at. But if you're truly working to walk the way of neutrality, which means accepting who you are in the moment and not clinging to it, and working with all parts of yourself as integrated as you can be in that moment, then that is the time of truth. As you can see, I'm not speaking about a big universal truth, but a very unique truth that is you, who you are, how you operate, your true capacity in moments. Not to be like, oh, these are the things that now I have to supersede. No, you have to know your lows and your highs and everything in between, not as something to conquer, but to intimately get to know your psychology, your biology, your physiology, all of your beingness, because it is creating your reality. As we sit in this time that is asking us to reach out into the unknown, we must then get to know ourselves truly and intimately, to know where our information stops. To step into wisdom means letting go of what you do not know as something to conquer, but as something to walk into deep wonder and communion. But to get to that point, you have to then know thyself truly. As I was working the land and meditating the other day, I had this moment where I reached a limit of mine. And it was probably a combination of many limits. They could have probably included I hadn't slept enough, I was tired, I had been working a lot on the land, so I was extra tired. I'm recovering from, physical injuries to add to that. Add to the fact that there's been a lot going on, a lot of busyness going on, a lot of, again, demands going on, a lot of agendas that want to be met, including my dog, that if you don't speak really nicely to them, gets really offended. And I had reached a limit. I knew I had reached a limit. Probably that it also included dehydration, amongst other things. And instead of being like, okay, I have to push through, or I have to collapse now, this beautiful possibility opened up. Because I was conscious of my limit. And I did not approach my limit as something to conquer, but something to surrender into. And so in that moment, the untapped relationship with my unconscious, which means my relationship with not just my unknown, but the unknown of all of the creatures of the world and the intelligences entangling together, knitting possibility, if we allow it, presented with me a question. What if you loved yourself to death? As you can see, I'm getting a little emotional here. And I've been sitting with this question and this possibility. And what it has brought up is not more answers, but instead that question is now so present in my beingness that at any moment, instead of going to my habit, I have come into the possibility of asking this question to my habit and my ways of being. In other words, when I look at my strengths, I ask myself, what if I loved myself to death? When I look at my weaknesses, I ask myself, what if I loved myself to death? I have been living this question for days, asking myself over and over, what about now? Or what about at this moment? And what about that moment? So it's not just about the physicality of your vessel and the limitations that as you grow and age no longer allows you certain capacities and capabilities as just your death. We're talking about death as an opportunity of crossing a bridge into the unknown. I'm reminded of my friends in New Orleans, and I was watching a recent movie that took place in New Orleans, and they were burying someone, and there was a parade happening. And that was one way to welcome death. Not just physical death, but the death of the opportunity of this person, my relationship and who I am has changed. What I know has changed because something of, or a way that I used to define myself in relationship has changed. If we didn't have physical deaths, we would not walk into the possible wisdom of transformation, of real change. And we live in a Western culture that is trying to cheat death. But in cheating death, we are cheating ourselves of the opportunity to walk the way of wisdom into the unknown, into a way of being that could never exist presently. And we have that opportunity every day to love ourselves to death, to love ourselves and sing a lullaby into the void, into what we do not know, to let go of the grip that we have on our reality. What if failure, instead of speaking about it in the way that we talk about it in so many Western programming, was just an opportunity to love yourself to death, to the unknown, to what you are actually not capable of in that moment. And if you let that moment go, then you step into that death and are reborn. Some of it with more knowing, that didn't work. Let me try it this way. Or sometimes because you reached out and received and allowed yourself to receive a different possibility. You let go, and all of a sudden, the question was birthed. What if? I'm not saying that it's easy. None of it is. Even having self-love or self-awareness is a challenge because it's a moving target. Everyone thinks that, now I know myself. Well, at that time, in that place, in that moment, but now that moment has passed. So we even have to die to the idea that we will truly know ourselves, because if we allow ourselves the opportunity to continue walking, growing, noticing, observing, and being impacted, then we are forever a growing, changing, evolutionary, universal experience of many questions. So how am I doing with that question posed to me? Well, at some moments, it's easier than others. And at the end of things, sometimes it's not easy to let go. And if you have a habit of trying or doing, you just need to know that that's one of the parts you have to love yourself to death in. Surrender isn't failure. And I sit with that now. As I sit with this ever-changing environment that we are living in. Where humans still allow war and seek it. Where humans don't mind walking with death if it is them in charge of the killing of species. Of their own kind and those all around them. Where still people around the world are not treated as sovereign beings, let alone equal. How can we expect the Western world to accept the sovereignty of a river or a lake? Just as New Zealand has. When they are so afraid of their own existence being changed. When they hate not having control or things come easily. Or they see the broken promise of a nation created not in equality or justice for all, but for few, and on the blood of the natives of this land. Sometimes it is this ideal, these false promises of safety that we must die to and accept humanity for what it is. Its great potential for creation and destructivity, many times hand in hand. And what if instead of just the rage and the anger and the grief, we could get to that point of loving it all? Love doesn't mean accepting it nor tolerating it, but knowing that there is an unknown energy that reflects upon itself, and knowing that at the center of this energy is this thing that we have coined the term to mean love. We even have to die to what we think or have defined love to be. And maybe the trecena that we are on and walking or flying into with ego, as we walk upon this new year with Mountain Lion, we can learn from our road, our path, our creation, and redefine and surrender what we know, and allow ourselves the grace of the unknown, not to figure it out frantically for safety and security. But to now allow ourselves the possibility of who we are in every moment of the unknown. And so as this rain continues to pour down, offering us the possibility of life, let us take a few moments to just approach the direction of the north. Now, the direction of the north is also, in many traditions, taught as a time outside of time. And so as we sit in this timelessness, as we sit in the north, gathering our prayers before we enter into the east, let us call upon the void. So if you'd like, you can take your 3 breaths in and out through the nose, bringing your mind into this time and space, in and out through the nose, bringing your body into this time and space, in and out through the nose, bringing your essence into this time and space. As you do that, and as you breathe, take a moment to even allow your breath to be what it wants to be, not forcing it, not changing it. And can you, in this moment, just be the observer? Be in your unknown. And then let us ask this question. And ask it of your body, of your mind, of your essence. Ask it of your habits. Can you love yourself to death? Can you love yourself to let go? Can you love yourself enough to not be in control? Can you love yourself enough to forgive? Can you love yourself enough, your grief, and the time you need to grieve? Can you allow yourself recovery? Can you allow yourself laughter? Can you allow yourself the end of a habit? Can you allow yourself the end of living and just coping? Can you allow yourself the end of just surviving in this world? And if you can love yourself even in these moments, then the possibility opens itself even more. Then maybe our striving will become thriving. And maybe thriving still takes time, still is not easy. But maybe possibly it means that every moment that we are met to be reactive and walk away from ourselves and cut connection with others and other beings, that we cross that bridge into the unknown. And possibly, maybe, possibly, we could finally not just ask for the help or the healing, but actually receive it. And so with gratitude, grace, and thanksgiving, we thank the North for this opportunity to be with this question and this invitation. Can we love ourselves to the unknown? And gratitude to the North, the East, the South, the West, those above, below, and on this plane of existence, all the realities and the teachings and the ancestors and the elements of all creatures and beings. We thank you, Shade. Once again, it is with deepest gratitude that I bow to you for joining me on this podcast, this episode, this circle, this plática, this meditation, this remembering. I hope that you have stayed curious. I hope to see you in the circle again next week. So make sure that you like or follow. Until then, may you be blessed with abundance of peace
peace and radical self-love.